What's going on, everybody? Aidan from Birds vs. Boys here, and it is a special week and a special episode. The Eagles travel to Kansas City in a Super Bowl rematch against the Kansas City Chiefs, the 7-2 Chiefs, the 8-1 Eagles, leading their divisions in primetime on Monday Night Football with the biggest pop star in the world probably in attendance. It is a big week as it is, and we made it even bigger here at BBB by bringing in one of our special reoccurring guests and a friend of the podcast, Morgan Burkett from PSN. We've been on his show. He's been on our show. Morgan, thanks for coming on what is a spectacle of a week.
Yeah. I mean, it's always a pleasure when I come on the pod or have you guys on our pod. So, I mean, if you didn't have this one circled to start the season, I don't know which one you did. You know, obviously this is kind of the gauntlet for the Eagles, but this one has to stand out. I mean, not only do you get the matchup of last year's Super Bowl, there's so many implications that I'm sure we're going to get into, but it's just like, if you're looking for a thread line to write a story about this is the game, right? Like this is the one. So yeah, I'm fired up. And on a Monday, you know what I mean? I love being tired on a Tuesday, knowing that I just watched a fantastic game last night. Like
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And we'll talk about the spectacle of the game first, like you said, and we talked about this pre-show. If you can't talk about this game, this probably isn't the line of work for you because this is like there's so many storylines. Spin a wheel and pick one. And I'm sure the league is thinking the same thing. They're like, thank you. After like a long stretch of primetime games that really weren't hyped up, not exciting, not quality opponents and stuff like that. Then they get a Super Bowl rematch with every storyline imaginable involved.
Yeah. I mean, like the biggest thing for me really is I think you're circling one team always as like the team to beat, right? And like, you guys do your rankings and stuff like that. Like it's really hard until you have that marker where it's like, okay, like what is the game that was 1 versus 2? Like I think back to that Rams versus Chiefs game a couple years ago. There was like, okay, that was the game where I was like, okay, like this is going to decide who I think might be the team to beat the Eagles, right? And so I feel like this game around the league is circled just so you have that pegging point. Like, okay, who's the team to beat? Because you always got to beat the number one team, and not only the number one team, but the number one player. And the MVP is up in the air. There's just so many good storylines all on a Monday night, and I think that's the thing too. Is I watched the guy. The other day he was complaining. He's like, man, like football is by far my favorite sport, but I don't even enjoy watching the games right now. So I don't even know if I like football because there've been so many bad games. And it's just been that kind of year. So having this now on the horizon, I think it just like people have been anxious for a game like this. Everyone's going to be watching. So no matter if you're a Chiefs or an Eagles fan, it's going to be an exciting one.
And there's the opportunity that you may not be a fan of either team or
100%.
Football in general, but you might be a fan of someone important. I have my shirt. I was like, if you're subscribed on YouTube, I've got my Taylor Swift shirt on. I was like, there's no other chance for me to wear this on this podcast. So
yeah.
Do you think this will be the most watched regular season game of all time? I was thinking about that and trying to rack my brain for other instances, but I think like storyline wise, it's hard to top this one.
100%. And I mean, like, all credit to Taylor. She's wonderful. And honestly, like, I'm for what she's doing for the sport. She's bringing in people that didn't watch football before and now they're watching. Like, that's a win in my books. I think, football speaks for itself. You just have to turn on the TV. Eventually you'll fall in love with it. So yeah, I'm all for it. The coverage is whatever. Does she need so much coverage? Maybe not, but regardless, she's bringing in people and we got to love it. So I think for that reason, there's going to be a lot of viewers, but also, man, the Kelsey brothers have made themselves famous in our sphere as well, doing the podcast thing. So I just think, like there's so many people that never watch football and all of a sudden they know I'm an Eagles fan and want to talk to me about Jason Kelsey and how awesome he is. Right. So I just think like it's a great time for football, like just becoming more global and you kind of have the centerfolds right now going at it head to head. With Mama Kelsey also being a celebrity herself. So I just think, again, like there's so many people being drawn to this game. I think you made a great point. I didn't even think about it, but this might be the most watched regular season game of all time.
Yeah, and you brought it up, like it's just like the star power of it. And I know the NBA has always prided themselves on being a star-driven league. The stars are going to attract people. And in that sport, people don't even really have like geographical ties to teams. Like people are LeBron fans, Steph fans. They pride themselves on being star-driven. I think this is the most star-driven game of all time, just because, like you mentioned, the Kelsey brothers, documentary on Amazon. Everybody who's watched it has laughed and cried. They have one of the biggest podcasts in the world. They're dating one of the biggest celebrities, the biggest celebrity in the world. And none of those people are the face of the NFL like Patrick Mahomes is. And he may lose MVP this year to our quarterback. So it's just like a huge, huge star power game. And it's just so star driven. It reminds me of the NBA. They try to like factor viewership through stars. And I don't think you could do a better job of that than in this Chiefs Eagles game.
100%. I mean, and we're kind of forgetting that, you know, there's a Sexiest Man Alive award on the table as well. So we can't forget, you know, if you're not watching for the football, you might be watching for the sex appeal. You know, you never know, right? So we don't want to judge, but I know it's great, and I just think like it's really, really cool to see outside of football how many celebrities are, you know, I can't count how many celebrities I've seen wearing something Eagles this year, where they're finally starting to show, you know, on tour with you know, an Eagles jersey on and stuff like that. Like, it's happened in the past, but this year it just seems like all the celebrities are starting to, you know, have alliances in certain teams and all that. Like, even Taylor Swift before the whole Kelsey thing was shouting out the Eagles at one of her concerts. And so like, I just feel like the ball's kind of rolling here, and you know, the NFL is doing a great job of kind of capitalizing on that.
They really are. Like, they've taken the model and perfected it, as the NFL always does. Like, this is the most like unstoppable force meets movable object. Like, the biggest celebrity of all time, entertainment world. Like, everybody will be tuned in, and then the NFL has perfected the star-driven model. They collide in the biggest game of the season for the NFL with a lot on the line.
The great cherry on top for the script this year. I think that's what it was. That's all it is.
I remember those commercials at the beginning of the year where it's like from Key and Peele, and they were like, this is the script. I don't think they could have written a better script than this game right here.
Yeah, shout out to them, man.
I know they were on a writer's strike, but man, they really came back with a bang with this one.
100%.
And we'll get into the game itself, but let's touch on last week in the NFL. This is the most NFL thing of all time. Like, we're looking ahead to this week. As you and I are recording, Ravens-Bengals is an awesome primetime game.
Yeah.
You've got Chiefs-Eagles, might be the biggest game of all time. Everybody looked past week 10, said, you know what, this is a boring week, bad primetime games. Oh, this is the apple picking week, you know. And then the games happen, and they have 6 walk-off wins for the first time in NFL history. And it's like, that's just the most NFL thing. It's just like, when you think they're going to be down, when you think the ratings are going to be low, chaos ensues. Everyone's still talking about them.
Yeah, I mean, that's what you have to love. Like, I think that the NFL, more than any other sport, really is a toss-up. You can have, you know, anyone can win in any given week. And I also feel like you're kind of seeing like a changing of the guard in terms of who's going to be competitive every year. You know, the Packers aren't there like they usually are. You know, you're seeing some other teams like the Vikings kind of, you know, fell off. Obviously, the Bucks had a fall off after Tom Brady left. Like, who knows what the Saints are? Like, there's so many divisions, you know. The Seahawks, you know, are pretty good, and we didn't really expect that. The Rams kind of fell off. Like, there's just so many divisions that these teams now are kind of vying for control. So it's kind of awesome to see. Like, I don't know what it is for you, but there's always that team where it's like, if they're good, like, football's good. And for me, it's always the Texans. Like, I remember watching Andre Johnson when Andre Johnson was killing the league and, you know, getting into fights and like all that stuff. And there's passion in Houston. Like, that was when football for me was good. Like, that brings back nostalgia. So like, to see the Texans, you know, I mean, always, like, I'm not an Eagles fan. I'm not like, I don't have a team 2 or anything like that, but football is always fun when the Texans are fun. And I think everyone kind of has that where they're like, okay, like I miss when so-and-so team was good. And so you're starting to see that changing of the guard. And that's what's like, you're having these close games that matter. Like, a lot of these times where we're in this part of the season, half the teams are kind of done. And you're not seeing that as much this year with the records. Like, there's a lot up for grabs every week. And so I can only imagine, like, I mean, you know, we're seeing exciting games like this now in November. Like, imagine these late December games. These Christmas games are going to matter. And so, we're setting up for a nice little push into the playoffs.
Yeah, the parity is on display on a week-to-week basis. Just the Texans, perfect example. If you play that game on paper in September, you're saying to yourself, oh, Bengals easily. They definitely beat the Texans. And the Texans go into Cincinnati and win that game over Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, some of the biggest stars in the league. Another team that we'll see in 2 weeks, the Buffalo Bills, lose to the Broncos. And that's another team, like, on paper, you would never give the Broncos a chance. And then it turns into like a crazy primetime game that we're all talking about. And it's just week to week, the parity is there. And that's why when Eagles fans complain, when they're 8-1. I'm like,
Yeah.
look around, look
Yeah.
at what is happening, and be appreciative of this record because it means something. Yeah, they screw up, but they're 8-1 for a reason because it could. There's a lot of teams that could be 8-1 and they're 5-5,
Yeah.
6. Like the Ravens have blown 3 double-digit leads this year. They're 7-3. They could be 10-0.
Right.
But they just they blow leads and stuff like that. To the Steelers 6-3. They could be 3-6. So it just makes you appreciative of what the Eagles have done.
100%. And what I really like too is often there's this this disparity between the AFC and the NFC as well. Like you kind of know, like, okay, like last year the AFC is like the Chiefs and like, there's a couple other teams, but it was the NFC that was kind of stacked, the playoff picture. And this year, like, I have no idea. I don't know who, if they made an all-star team and actually played, unlike the Pro Bowl, I don't know who would win that game. Like it's very close, and every team kind of has been showing what, like, even the Browns, like, they got nothing going and still they're competitive. They might win just on that defense. Like, we haven't seen that kind of football before, where it's like we're just going to be good at what we do and hope we get into the playoffs. Like it's just very exciting all around, man.
Yeah, the AFC North, I don't know what to make of that at all. Yeah, everyone has a winning record and everyone's competing for the playoffs, and I'm not sure if anyone in the division is actually good.
No, yeah, I don't like this. The fact that the Steelers are still there somehow. I mean, credit to Mike Tomlin. Like, it seems like it's every year, but this Steelers team seems really, really bad, and yet they're 6-3. Like, I don't understand.
No, yeah, it's so funny. It's like Pittsburgh is a city. I feel like people have that view. It's like, oh, it's ugly, and they're like, actually, when you're there, it's pretty nice. Yeah. I feel like that's how Steelers fans feel about the team. They're like, wow, this is ugly. Actually, we're 6-3. Yeah. It's not that bad.
100%. 6-3, and the Bengals just lost the Texans. Like, we're feeling pretty good,
We're all right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So great time for the league, and I feel like this is like I don't want to say grand finale, but it's kind of the midway point, and just going to be a fireworks show. So I think this will be really good. Getting into the game itself, I think there's some storylines that kind of go overlooked when you have this much star power in the game. But our tight end situation, Dallas Goedert, not on IR, huge.
Yep.
Because of this bye week that we just had. They're not putting him on IR because they're thinking time frames 4 weeks. You count the bye, that's only 3 games.
Yep.
He will be back hopefully within those 3 games. But this week we're looking at Jack Stoll, Grant Calcaterra. How worried are you about this position on Monday night? And who do you think kind of plugs in for Goddard while he's gone? It doesn't necessarily need to be a tight end.
Sure. Yeah. No, I don't know. I feel like I'm maybe being a bit naive where I'm not that nervous about it. But if you asked me this question the same time last year and they had lost Dallas Goedert, I would feel a lot more nervous. But for some reason, this offense, similar to how they kind of hit that run late in the season last year and then kind of into the playoffs, is they've been able to lean on different players. For a lot of those weeks, it's been A.J. Brown. But, for the first couple games of the season, it was Smitty. And then, Dallas has had his games as well where, they're leaning on. And there's been the DeAndre Swift games as well, right? So this team has kind of figured out ways to lean on different players. And so what I actually think is, obviously you never want to lose a player like that, but it does give the Eagles an opportunity to kind of figure out what their number 3 is without Dallas Goedert, right? Mm-hmm. How can they spread the ball out? We might see more, read option. They might spread people out and run that read option and get Jalen Hurts running game going now that his knee's apparently feeling better. It might be Right. It might be the case where they find like who that consistent number 3 is, like we saw last year with Zach Pascal. They started getting him involved, right? They started, like, it wasn't just getting him involved, but drawing up plays to get him active, right? And it was those third downs with the slip routes and all that stuff. So I think that, like, on paper, it's a big loss. Don't get me wrong. But I think this gives the Eagles kind of an opportunity to find what is that deeper option, because you're going to need that in the playoffs. Like, it always happens where, you're on a run and then all of a sudden they got everyone covered. It seems like no one's open. And you need that extra guy to kind of work his way into the lineup. That being said, I think Jack Stoll might have a game. And that's just like he's been working, man. Like, I love his game. He's a blue collar hard worker, and a lot of good stuff happens when you do the little things, right? Football's a complicated game, but when you make the hard things simple, like Jack Stoll, when you're blocking, his technique's good. He works hard. He outworks the guy in front of him. If you just outwork the guy in front of you, you got a good chance to have a good game. And I think that's what Jack Stoll does. And are they going to be fantastic catches? Are we going to see the same yak that Dallas Goedert has? Probably no. He doesn't bring the same skill set to the table, but just looking at who the Eagles have, you have to cover them on the outside. You have to cover A.J. Brown. You have to cover Devontae Smith. So there's going to be a lot of open field in the middle. So I think Jack Stoll might have a game. Grant Calcaterra as well. I just think that you can't put Calcaterra on the field as much because he doesn't give you that blocking tight end.
Yeah. I think it would be just flat out hilarious if Jack Stoll had a bigger game than Travis Kelce on Monday night with all things considered. It would just be the most because of sports thing that you could
100%.
ever imagine.
Yeah.
And I do like, I think you're right. I think you're more confident this year, and a lot of it's because it was what happened last year. Like you're in a Groundhog Day situation. Bill Murray woke up and he's hearing the same song on the radio. Like Dallas Goedert is hurt at the same point of the season and out for the same time period. And it's almost like, all right, I'm confident because they've done this before and they knew how to make up for it last year. And they kind of just go back to that same formula. I think the formula this year might be a little bit different. And I think the answer you almost default to, I think you're right with Jack Stoll. I think a lot of people would default to, oh, well, Julio will step up. Right. And I get that, like big body, big frame, just like Goddard. I think it'll be more this year of just force feeding the two well-known names. Like it's just A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith. And he's like, well, who fills in for number 3? Like who's the third option? It's like nobody. You just have two really, really good 1 and 2 or 1B, 1A, and they just get the ball more. Just force feed them. When your back is against the wall on a multiple choice test, you just fill in C. Most of the time it works. That's the same thing. Like if you're down and you're out, Goddard's out, just fill in C and throw Devontae the ball, get AJ Brown the ball. Everything will work itself out.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of perfect timing too, right? Because Devontae Smith, he's had a bit of a down month, I guess. Like he started to find his feet a little bit in the last couple of weeks. But even the Washington game where you kind of padded the stats a little bit, like I don't think that was a great game for Devontae Smith. You know, he found himself open, but still we haven't really seen that second gear that we're kind of used to seeing where he's he showed it early on in the season. As soon as he hit the ground running, we're like, okay, it might be over. And then he kind of, hit a little dip in the season. So this might be the perfect week to get him going again. And I think the other thing we didn't talk about is we saw it a little bit, but they really haven't used DeAndre Swift in the pass game as much as we thought. And so we saw a play in Washington where they split him out wide and tried to throw the go route. And I think you're going to see more of that just because of the matchup he creates. Like, if that's getting Nick Bolton out of the box because he's got to go cover. I mean, like that's something you do, right? Like that's a look you give that defense just because you're running the gauntlet. You want these teams to start think about, okay, how are we going to cover this? They don't have Dallas Goedert anymore. You're going to give Kansas City a lot of looks because the next couple of teams you have on your radar, you don't want them to just game plan for the simple stuff. And I think that's something that Brian Johnson really has to start kind of putting his foot down to the pedal a little bit, getting a little creative and starting to show, okay, like we're not just, a simple, we're going to beat you because we're better than you kind of team. Like we have some wrinkles, we can do some things and put it on tape.
If I had one complaint this year, it would be that right there. It's like at some point there needs to be like some situational creativity to the game plan. And that's actually a great call because if you remember in training camp, that was one of the biggest storylines was how often they were using DeAndre Swift in the passing game and he was running routes with the receivers and he was doing like pass catching drills. Then it got into the season and I feel like he took over as RB1, which has been phenomenal. Like he's been doing a great job, but it kind of took away from that pass catching ability. And you're right. Like, maybe he is that third option now and they revert back to that and kind of get him involved in the passing game. Another thing I'd like to see with Devontae, you mentioned kind of just having an off month. And I know like AJ Brown set an NFL record. So that it'll tend to have an off month, there's only so many sales in the workforce to go around. If your coworkers having a record sales month, you probably don't have as many sales.
Exactly.
But it happens. But I feel like we did such a good job last year with like wide receiver screens, bubble screens with Devontae Smith, and just kind of less so this year. So I don't know if that's kind of a wrinkle that they bring back and kind of get that offensive line down the field and moving because of how athletic they are. So there's a lot of different ways that they can go with it, which is nice.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, tight end screens as well, right? Like we saw a lot more of that last year. Like, I mean, again, that was more of a Doug Peterson thing, especially with those 2 tight end sets. But even still, like last year, we saw more of it. So I just feel like this is one of those games where you start to figure out ways to get the ball in your playmakers' hands. And it might just be that you throw a couple wrinkles at the defense just to get an open look. And then hopefully that your players can get a couple yards after catch.
For sure. And like you said, like this is just feels like a game. You get it to the playmakers. And I think for both of these teams, maybe more so the Chiefs than the Eagles, the offense has been a question. It doesn't feel the same as years past. It doesn't feel the same as the Eagles offense from a year ago. Even that game in Germany for the Chiefs, they scored 2 touchdowns. The third touchdown was a lateral fumble Ruski play on defense. They didn't score in the second half. It hasn't felt the same. You think maybe it won't be the same. Something tells me on Monday night with the bright lights and some of the best players in the world in the football, like in the game, I think we see a shootout. Like
Yeah.
it's easy to think everything you've seen on tape this year tells you that the defenses are better for both these teams. It's hard for these offenses to score. Something tells me bright lights, like the biggest players in the game show up.
Yeah, and in my head too, I think it might take a while to get going, but I think eventually, like it kind of just breaks open and you see a lot of scoring. I mean, I think that like on the outside looking in, we kind of expect greatness to repeat itself, and the Chiefs, the one thing that they've had on their side is consistency, right? Like how many times do we see a team go to the Super Bowl often and then they just get rated for all their coaches, right? And the Chiefs have been lucky that they've kind of retained a lot of their coaching staff. And, this year we're seeing a bit of a change, and it just takes time when you have a new OC, right? You have some new faces in the locker room. It just takes time to get that going. And so, I mean, it at the end of the day, it's still Mahomes, and, he's making plays himself. It's just been that extra added kind of like magic that we haven't seen as much of. Not that we haven't seen it, but a lot of that again just goes like builds off of making the simple plays happen, right? And it just feels like for the Chiefs, like everything has been a bit more sticky. It's been, the gears aren't quite meshing, like whatever that is. So then the magic that Mahomes has to do, it feels more frantic than wow, I'm watching something fantastic unfold before my eyes. It feels more like it's like, like that was lucky. And I think people forget just how special that offense is. So I think, like you said, like this seems like the perfect time to start seeing those gears click. And it was similar like when the Eagles played Miami, right? And like in big games like this, good teams kind of figure it out and things start to click, and then you start to see some dominance. So
for sure. And I think that I don't know if it's this week. It might be. Hopefully not. But for the Chiefs, it just feels like they're building with a new set of receivers. And Tyreek is a huge hole, but then they lose Juju Smith-Schuster. They think Kadarius Toney will be something. He's out. And it's like, all right, well, let's start to work with Sky Moore, Rashee Rice. Like, what do we have in these guys? And Mahomes is so good, we think it'll be a flip of a switch. And that probably it's just not how football works. Like, it's a timing thing. It's a rhythm thing. Once they get in that timing and rhythm, they'll be fantastic. But I just hope it's not this week, because you just feel like eventually they're going to figure it out, because it's him and it's Andy Reid. And let's just not make it the fourth quarter of Monday night.
Yeah, well, I mean, on the flip side of things, you look at the Eagles team, and like it hasn't really been the same defense we've expected over the last couple of weeks too. So, it's not without some worry that you hope that the Chiefs don't get it clicking, because it's not just if the Chiefs get it going, this could be a shootout. It's if this gets going, it might be pretty one-sided, and that's just because this defense, right, when they've been struggling, have really looked not great. And you can't do that against a guy like Patrick Mahomes. Like these aren't okay. Like, bend but don't break will hold him to a field goal. If you let him drive the field on you, he's going to score.
Yeah.
And the Eagles just aren't built the same way that the Chiefs are, where they want to come back from a 3-score game. Like that's not really in the Eagles, wheelhouse. It's not in the game plan. Not saying they can't do it. But I think what you're hoping is that early on that secondary looks a lot better.
Yeah. And it might, because I think part of the issue that we have is the fear of the unknown.
Right.
Every week it's a new starting secondary. This will be the closest that we have to it. I know Avonte Maddox is probably out for the season, but you're getting Bradley Roby back, who's been out the past few weeks. It'll be his first time playing with Kevin Byard in the secondary. Reed Blankenship healthy, Darius Slay and Bradbury on the corners. And I know there's been a lot of talk about Bradbury's performance this year, but at the same time, like this is as close as you've been to healthy. So they could perform really well. They could perform poorly. I was in a haunted house a few weeks ago, and the scariest part was when you're in the total darkness and you don't know which way to turn. It's not the monsters popping out at you. It's that fear of the unknown. I don't know what's coming at me when I turn the corner next. And I feel like every week it's been like that with the Eagles secondary. Like, yeah, I really don't know what we're going to get from them. Could be good, could be bad. And like against the Dolphins, you'd think they get shredded against Tyreek Hill. And I know Waddle went out early and then they didn't. And then Sam Howell has lit them up twice. I don't know what to expect. And I don't know what to expect on Monday.
Yeah, I mean, Sam Howell, like, out of that draft class, he was my favorite quarterback because there's something about him. Like, I think people are kind of discrediting him, but he's leading the league in yards right now. Like, there's a reason for that. And like, no offense to the Commanders, but I don't know that offense is like propping him up. Like, I think that he's doing a lot of this on his own.
All offense to the Commanders. They are not helping him at all.
Fair enough, but there's something there. So I think we're kind of discrediting Howell a little bit, but absolutely, like even Zach Wilson looked pretty good at times, against the Eagles secondary. So it kind of like you said, right? Like when you have veterans kind of speckled around that secondary, it just makes a difference, right? And the communication is the biggest thing for me. You talk about when you lose like a guard on the offensive line, how much that means in terms of just your protection and your communication on the line. And you're talking about a secondary now. There's so many more moving parts. There's so much more space to cover. Having a guy that you're maybe not as familiar with talking to you, it goes a long way. And it's just that confidence in the back of your head. Like cornerbacks have to be confident at all times. And all of a sudden that familiar voice behind you isn't there anymore. And then you're also learning still a new defense that's constantly growing. It really does matter. So you're right. Like, I don't think that Roby coming back can be understated. Like, I think that's a huge addition. Obviously, we talk about it all year, how much it means to lose Maddox. Like, we forget. We go, oh, Maddox is just a player. And then he goes out and we're like, oh, wow. Like, he's a really good slot corner and we needed him. So I think that's a huge get back. And that should help out the secondary a lot.
Definitely. I was at the Vikings game week 2, and I just remember it so vividly where it was the game Maddox got hurt. Bradbury was already out with the concussion, and Blankenship was out with the ribs. And in between plays, Slay was huddling up the secondary and kind of showing them what to do on crossers, on these routes. Like, he was coaching up, and he was like, you really, if he goes here, he releases to you, and doing it on the fly against Justin Jefferson. And you're just like, dear God, if the offense gets the ball back, please hold it for 8 minutes because we will not be able to hold up. So like you said, it can't be understated to have veterans who know what they're doing, communicate well, and having the guys in the back end finally playing together for what's been a few weeks now. So it comes at the perfect time considering where they're at in the schedule, and they needed it badly.
100%. Yeah.
And Cam Jurgens as well. You mentioned the offensive line. I think Tyler Steen will be good, but there's a few plays where Michael went by him and you're like, all right, maybe next year.
Yeah, exactly. 100%. I mean, it wasn't any better with Opeta. And so I just think that there's a lot of parts that are kind of fitting into place right now for the Eagles. And this could be a special game where you're kind of like, okay, like the Super Bowl is real. I think that's this game is like, do we have some ways to go, or is this a real thing? I think this is that game.
I think so too. And I think depending on this performance of the game, I think it'll give us a good indicator, a good litmus test of the league overall. I mentioned this week to someone because I saw that both the Eagles and the 49ers checked in on Patrick Surtain and if he would be available at the trade deadline. And it just feels like the NFL Cold War. It's just the biggest countries with the most resources trying to add even more weapons to their resources. And I feel like we might walk away from this game Monday, win or lose, and just be like, yeah, there's parity in the league, but not really. It might just be like 3 good teams and a pretty good 28, 29 other teams.
Yeah.
And the Jets also exist.
It reminds me of fantasy football. You start getting close to the playoffs, and all of a sudden, people are trading first-round picks for whoever they can get their hands on, and all of a sudden, 2 teams are stacked. And you're like, all right, I guess that's the finals then.
Yeah, it's like, all right, oh, you acquired Christian McCaffrey 2 weeks before the playoffs. Awesome. I wonder how this is going to go.
Yeah, you have 4 picks left next year, but this year you look pretty good.
You go all in. That works until someone strains their hamstring week 1 of the fantasy playoffs. Yeah, like, well, that was it. I had fun for the last 13 weeks, and it's over.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So it's so funny. We've made it about half hour into the show. Talk about burying the lead. And I almost kind of wanted to because there's so many other things to talk about. But Jalen Hurts, Patrick Mahomes, 1 and 2 in the odds for MVP this year. What do you think happens in this matchup between these two? Does this game decide MVP with their performance?
I think it has to. Like, I think, if you're the voter, and you're looking at this game, it's going to really matter who wins it. And I think that's because that's really been the difference in these two quarterbacks is, the stats are going to be incredible. The big plays are going to be big all the time, right? Like, it's just, there's these two guys that on paper are going to be fantastic all the time. It's those little details of like, okay, well, who won the head-to-head? Who had the most comebacks during the season? Who, got the most first downs on their feet, freestyling? And those things are going to matter. And so, as good as the voters are, I feel like they kind of pick and choose which games they watch. And so, this would be the game to watch. There's other players that I think, if they make kind of a push in the late season, they might be in the running too. Like, I don't think it's a 2-man race, to be honest. I think there's definitely other people that could rear their heads. But realistically, if the season keeps going the way it does, you're probably looking at a 3-person race between those two and Lamar Jackson. And, Lamar, I mean, for a guy who has him on fantasy, like, somehow he's an MVP candidate, but I do not really understand.
Can we talk about this? They've scored 30 for 3 straight weeks. He's quarterback 17 during that stretch. How does it every week? I'm like, oh, the Ravens are up. They're up 31-3. He must have done well. He's struggling to get me double-digit points.
Yeah, he's got 150 yards passing. You're like, I don't understand. I don't understand. Like, yeah, I know.
Then, like the one game, I was like, oh, passing touchdown. They were up by so much, they took him out of the game. And I'm like, he's getting. If you looked at his stat line in fantasy, you'd be like, oh, they must have lost by 27 points. Right. And they're like, oh no, they won by 27 points. Yeah. It makes no sense. I cannot figure it out.
Which also makes the Ravens so scary. Like, I have no idea. There's some teams that are good, and I know they're good, and I don't know how they're good. And the Ravens are one of those this year.
They're good, and I'm like, I don't know how you're bad. Like, how last week they're up double digits twice in the fourth quarter. It's like, how are you guys bad? How did you lose that game? How did you lose to the Colts at home and when you're up in the fourth quarter? It's just nothing they do makes sense, and that may prohibit Lamar from the MVP. Or by the time we're done recording this, he'll have 4 touchdowns and a half against the Bengals, and this whole Mahomes Hurts conversation is out the window. But
I do think there's another guy in that group that the game tonight that might actually have a shot as well if he leads his team to the playoffs.
Joe Burrow?
Yeah.
I think so. Kind of crazy. Back half. Yeah. Listen, as a Phillies fan here in Philadelphia, Bryce Harper, like,
100%. It matters.
Yeah,
it matters.
Over second half of the year and won MVP, so I could see Burrow doing it too, depending on how those games go. But I do think we touched on it before, but everything in this game says, great pass rush for the Eagles, great defense, great secondary for the Chiefs. The offense haven't been the same. Then you get these two like fierce competitors on the field, and it's like, oh, they're going blow for blow, and it's like. It's one of those games you're like, shit, we left them 9 seconds and they have a timeout. Is that too much time?
Exactly. Yeah.
It's just like, it feels like whoever has the ball last wins the game. Yeah. And with Hurts, I think he needs this game. He doesn't need this game. I need people to pay attention to his game. I got an argument about Dak last week, and I don't care about the stats anymore. Like, at some point it has to matter. But Hurts is 8-1 second straight season, 7th quarterback since 1970 to do that. Like, in 12 straight wins against teams with a winning record. Like, at some point, that stuff has to matter. 100%. And I feel like if you beat the Chiefs in primetime, people start to pay attention to stats like that. At least that's my hope.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I think, and we talked about it on Flippin' the Birds. Like, we were talking about the same thing, and I think it's always kind of be the story is whenever you have a good team like this, you just look at the Chiefs, right? And they don't really have the same receivers the Eagles have. And that shouldn't be held against Jalen Hurts. The thing is, like, AJ Brown's making all these fantastic plays, but, like, you talk about Washington, those 2 touchdowns, like, those balls are perfect. Those are perfect throws that only he can make a play on. You're not necessarily expecting him to make the crazy one-handed catch here, but that's the only play that can be made on that ball. and it is a perfect throw. And just because A.J. Brown's been so fantastic, a lot gets taken away from Jalen Hurts. The same thing. He's not out there hooting and hollering and celebrating. He's, he throws the most miraculous touchdown of his life, and he goes, all right, cool, and goes back to the sideline. You're like, it's hard for people to get behind that as the MVP, but like, for me, like that guy's straight ice. Like that's the kind of guy who's the MVP for that reason. Is like he's not done working until he's won that Super Bowl, and then he's gonna win the next Super Bowl. So unfortunately, like it might not be this year, but Jalen Hurts is gonna win an MVP at some point. Like I just know it's coming because he's that guy.
I was gonna say I feel like how he's mentally driven would lead him to great success, and as he starts to put marquee wins together, that campaign starts to get legs and kind of churn. 100%. And I do think we almost run into like a LeBron situation where in the NBA, you could give LeBron the MVP every year for like a decade straight. Right. And it became an award of like, okay, well, who's not LeBron, who's also valuable to their team? Right. And the NFL may run into that where it's like, all right, we can't give it to Mahomes again. Like we can't do it for the 5th straight year. And that's where Hurts comes into play. Or Hurts just flat out beats him. And I love the tush push. It's effective. Not everyone can do it. If they did, what was that quote from Sirianni? If everyone could do it, they would, but they can't. Yeah. So it gets so much attention that it takes away from some of the throws that Hurts has been making. Like that Cowboys game, the biggest play of that game is the throw to Devontae Smith in the corner and drops it in a bucket with a bad knee. And it's like the past 2 weeks, he hasn't been able to run. He's had to use his legs, or I'm sorry, he's had to use his arm. He's been fantastic with it. So I hope that, and I know he's feeling healthier, brace is off, so he may be using his legs more, but as a passer, he's made incredible strides and makes some incredible throws. And we just talk about a QB sneak over and over again.
Yeah. I mean, like, I feel like we're kind of just beyond the stage where we can like, how many years was it in a row where Tom Brady's winning the MVP? He's not scrambling at all. Right. Yeah. And so it's like, it's weird now that we've reached this age where it's like, unless there's incredible plays where they're juking, both DNs and then beating a linebacker to the sideline and then throwing a bomb 80 yards down for a game winning touchdown, like they're not the MVP. And it's just unfortunate, but they got to put it on a spectacle. So hopefully Jalen gets one of those plays this week and then we can put it all to rest, because that dude definitely deserves to, at least have the leg up at this point in the season.
Absolutely. And it's one of those things. It's like a Heisman moment in college football. If you make the play against Mahomes, it's hard. Even the biggest doubters, it's going to be hard to be like, no, it should be Mahomes. It's like, well, they played head to head. Yeah. And he won the game and he made plays to allow his team to win. So I think it's right there for him. And as fans, I genuinely hope it happens because I think he deserves it. And I think he gets overlooked with some of the narratives that are out there. But regardless, this should be a fantastic game. I'm excited for the spectacle of it all, and it'll be a really good time.
100%. Yeah. I mean, in the back of my head too, I'm thinking about the coach of the year that Doug Peterson should have won. And head to head. It is Philly sports after all, right? So, we're
going to get robbed somehow. Nick Sirianni, like last year, they gave it to Brian Dable. I was like, well, he improved the team. Yeah. I was like, well, you didn't give it to Sirianni when he improved the team and got them. Like, they went. We're the wild card. We made it. You didn't give it to him. Then you improved the team again, and you still don't give it to him. Give it to Brian Dable. And how
are the Giants this year?
That's the crazy part. It's like, if you get through this gauntlet, you got Giants, Cardinals, Giants to end the season. Yeah. Thank goodness Josh Dobbs is gone because he has classic just Philly killer written all over
100%. 100%. Yeah, if they played the Vikings now, I don't know.
I would put us as underdogs in that game. It's not even upset alert because I would be. It would just be upset.
Yeah, they should definitely be the favorites in that game. We do get the Jonathan Gannon revenge game, so you never know.
But I can't wait for that. I can't. If he wins that game, that's like when the Sixers lose to the Celtics without Walker. It's like I can't do this. Like I hate you too much to lose to you.
Everything I know about who should be good at football is going to go down the drain if Jonathan Gannon beats the Eagles.
Goes out the window. He was really prepping for this game when he was supposed to be prepping for the Super Bowl.
Yeah, 100%. He had this game already circled the week before the Super Bowl.
Oh God. Yeah. Honestly, he was like, next year. That'd be crazy.
Yeah.
Oh man. Well, we do get that Super Bowl rematch. I think this will be a phenomenal game. I'm sure we'll talk about it afterwards. Before we get you out of here, Morgan, do you want to do some power rankings? I'm assuming the Chiefs and Eagles might come up.
Well, I mean, of course. But yeah, 100%. I think that I got a good list. I feel pretty confident. But I'm sure some people will disagree. But yeah, let's do it.
Trust me, your list could be perfect. They will
Yeah,
disagree.
100%. I'm
The
sure.
kids on TikTok are ruthless. If there's
Yeah.
one takeaway from this, is that Jalen Hurts will make plays with his arm, and kids on TikTok are ruthless.
Yeah.
All right, let's do it. 5 down to 1. I'll start with 5. We'll make our way down. At 5, I have the 49ers. Kind of, you see when they're healthy, they're pretty damn good. You saw it. They had the 3-game losing streak, didn't have Trent Williams, didn't have Deebo Samuel, got everybody back and looked pretty successful. So at 5, I have the 49ers.
At 5, I actually have the Cowboys. I was really impressed with the way they battled. It just seems like there's something different in the air in Dallas this year. I think that kind of gets them over the hump. As good as the 49ers has got, and I don't want to spoil anything, I think that they didn't address some key concerns on that offense. And as good as that offense has been, you're facing a different monster in the playoffs with some of these teams.
Definitely. At 4, I have the Lions. As an Eagles fan, I'm pretty concerned about them. The back half of their schedule is not too difficult. They've been playing well, won a shootout against the Chargers. Have the Chargers ever won a close game? Like, could you help us out one time? The Chargers on my list are 33rd because never
they
help.
have to be. They have to be.
But at 4, I have the Lions.
Yeah, no, at 4, I also have the Lions. It's just like a scary team. They're coached well. It's hard not to love what the Lions are doing right now. They're playing football the right way. They're an exciting team. And, I just feel for the city of Detroit. They've been through it. I think this team is legit. And if you give this team an opportunity in the playoffs, they will make you pay.
Definitely. And it could be going through Detroit, depending on how the back half of this year goes.
Right.
At 3, I have the Ravens. I'd like an asterisk. 1, because they're playing now, and 2, because I don't know what the Ravens are. 1 week they show up and they kill somebody, and then the next week they blow a double-digit lead in the fourth quarter. I don't know what they are, but I feel like I have to put them 3. So the Ravens are 3.
At 3, I actually have the Chiefs. So, I mean, one of the reasons is I just feel like, again, that offense is, the gears aren't really clicking, kind of like we talked about earlier. I think they will get it together. I just feel like the team that I have above them are just a little more dominant when they are dominant. I think the Chiefs this year are a little bit beatable. That doesn't account for Mahomes' magic. They may still win the Super Bowl, but they're my number 3 team right now.
At 2, I have the Eagles. You will not catch me putting the Eagles at 1 in a week when they're playing the Chiefs, and this could come back to bite me and backfire. They will not be 1. Great team, 8-1, happy where they're at. Will not put them 1 this week.
No, it's good. You don't want to jinx it, right?
Exactly.
100%. At 2, I have the Ravens. I mean, we touched on it earlier too, but it's scary that they're winning and Lamar's not playing at the level that we expect Lamar to play at. It's crazy that they're winning and they're not, having the ball fly through the air to Mark Andrews. I still think that he's been fantastic and could be better. That's the scary part. Every corner of this team has talent. This is a team that once they start believing, and I think that that's why you've seen them lose some of these close games. I don't feel like they truly believe yet, but all it takes is a couple big wins, and all of a sudden you kind of have a monster rolling into the playoffs.
Definitely. At 1, I have the Chiefs. They're a great team. Everything's rolling for them coming out of the bye. Andy's so good coming out of the bye week. Mahomes, could he win MVP again? Probably. I see no reason not to put the Chiefs at number 1 this week.
Well, I mean, here, I got to be the one to do it, I guess. I hope I'm not jinxing anything, but at number 1, I have the Eagles. I just think the way they've been winning this year, overcoming adversity, there's something, again, like I said the same thing about Dallas, there's something different about Philly this year where they're just finding ways to win in unconventional ways. Like, again, you shouldn't be down to the Commanders. You shouldn't be going toe-to-toe with Sam Howell, but it doesn't matter. You got the win. There's some games here where it's like, okay, like, it might be a knock against them, but what I think it is a knock for them. They're figuring it out. This is a team with great chemistry. You can tell just by the way they bounce back from adversity. And close games, man, they build character. This is a team that if they can just handle this gauntlet, should be hitting the ground running come playoffs.
Absolutely. And it could be another close game come Monday night. Prime time, Monday Night Football. Everyone's excited. Eagles fans, Chiefs fans, the league itself. It should be a spectacle. I can't wait. Morgan, I'm sure you are very excited as well. Before we get you out of here, let everyone know where they can find you, social media, and your podcast as well.
For sure. So, I mean, on Twitter, I'm Morgan_PSN. I'm not as active, but if you would like to keep up with the podcast, it's Flippin' the Birds, Flippin' the Birds Pod on Instagram. We're live every Tuesday. You come check us out. We've had Aidan on before plenty of times, and we're going to have him on again. So, if you like seeing more BVB, then, come on Flippin' the Birds. We'd love to have them on too. So you can find us on all your socials. We're on Apple Music, Spotify, all the good places. So please come check us out and, drop a comment, drop a like. We love talking football. So
I love it. And we talked today. I think we're going to have a BVB week. Dallas hate week. We'll be on and we'll be ready to go, and we'll be fired up as always when it's Eagles Cowboys.
Yeah.
So that'll be a lot.
That's another big game, man. That's gonna be a big one.
Every game. I'm gonna start. I know I started the show this week being like, it's a special week. I feel like for the next month and a half, I'm gonna start the show with it's a special week.
100%. I've already started talking to my friend who's a Bills fan. Like, it just started already.
My work. We work with a lot of people from the Buffalo area. They are ready to fire everyone, but still, they recognize it's put up or shut up at this point in their season. 100%. So it'll be a huge game. So that'll be fun. All right, we'll be back this week recapping Eagles Chiefs. I'm sure it'll be a crazy game, and we'll get back to our episodes next week, previewing everything. Like we said, it's a special week every week from here on out, and we will be on Flippin' the Birds. December 10th is the Eagles Cowboys game.
I believe so.
That week we will definitely be on. So make sure to follow both podcasts, subscribe where you can, YouTube, Spotify, everywhere, and follow us on Twitter. We'll be back after what will be the biggest and most watched game in NFL history.
Let's go.